So today we're going to talk about sustained performance, and so how we can think about using career frameworks to drive outcomes, and we'll talk about it in the Pando system. I want to just frame us as we dive in so that you all get a better sense of how the career frameworks support driving these outcomes. I think, as we all know, traditional performance aligns employees with a set of questions to respond to, typically once or twice a year. And so the outcomes that we usually get don't necessarily support driving a performance culture in a meaningful way. It's very much focused on kind of how can we provide promotions to the people that are kind of in this top tier of the business. And so we really want to figure out how can we optimize for performance across the organization. So what we'll talk about today is just understanding the connection between goals and behaviors. How do we think about making sure that employees can drive more of these behaviors and initiatives forward? And so this isn't a burden that feels or is placed on the entire organization and is felt by managers. And then how do we implement continuous performance calibration? So this was actually a quote that came from the session earlier. Are you building a team of high performers or a high performing team? And so I think that it's really interesting to think about that, because a lot of our customers come to us and what they're thinking about is, how do I optimize for all of my employees, driving higher impact, developing more, and building the business? And traditional performance reviews oftentimes helps us again with those top employees instead of up leveling the entire organization. So the metric that we think about when we talk about this is called employee lifetime value. Let me know if anybody is familiar with this metric or if you've explored using this metric internally. Employee lifetime value, for those that are unfamiliar, is a metric that focuses on these key inflection points over your employee's journey that we can optimize for in order to drive higher impact and retain our employees. So it's from their first day to their last day. You can see that optimizing for a shorter ramp time, increasing how high someone is able to grow, making sure that they're able to grow consistently over time. These are key levers that we can optimize for in order to make sure that we're increasing the employee lifetime value in the business. And so the opportunity for everyone is to think about, where are some of these key inflection points in my business today that we could really be setting our employees up for success? Is it that they don't have clear role expectations? Is it that they don't have a structured growth path quite yet? Is it that we haven't figured out how to think about continuous career progression and how to optimize for that? And so that's a lot of what we're gonna talk about today, and also explore in the Pando platform. So the career frameworks are the foundational element that helps all employees to understand what they need to work on. So when we think about career frameworks, we're gonna walk through an example. It's rooted in, what is our leveling structure across the business? And is there a consistent understanding of what those levels mean and what the business impact expectations are? And then what competencies should we be defining to help people be successful within our organization and within their roles? And so aligning those career frameworks and creating transparency around that is really what starts to drive or influence your employee lifetime value. Because at the end of the day, the majority of employees, about 14%, don't see value in the traditional performance review. So that once a year conversation that's largely generally questions based. When employees do see value and see and feel we feel higher engagement or we see increased retention is when we're focused on continuously calibrating them and we're focused on aligning them with their career framework so they see a trajectory, they understand what they should be working on. So we're going to dive into Pando and we're going to explore this a bit deeper so that you can see what this looks like in action here. I'm curious, has anybody here built their career frameworks yet? Do you have levels that are created? Has anybody defined competencies, whether across the organization or maybe for specific roles? Has anybody dove into that work yet? Okay, amazing. Amazing. Sarah, what pieces of that have you already started to create?
We're in the middle of compensation with evaluating analysts. We've already rolled out 90% of our comp philosophy and 90% of our performance philosophy. We're still in the leveling process that we need to roll out, and then the finalized comp ranges and how they all play together,
Amazing.
and then how that applies to promotions and performance in general.
Amazing. That's such an exciting spot to be in. Getting
I
the
can see the
getting the
light.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Anybody else started this process or built out competencies yet? Hi, Sophie. Hi, Catherine. Sophie, I think you might have been working on this with a few clients, right?
Yes, I was literally looking to take myself off mute. I am in the process with two different companies right now as a consultant, and it's been super interesting to just see how, like, values-wise companies approach competencies and leveling. One group I'm helping, we've decided on the competencies, and now we're trying to figure out how we want to define those and measure against them. And one of them we're a little bit earlier in the process. Just learning what leveling is, teaching them what leveling is, I guess.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting, working with the many different organizations over the past 4 years or so at Pando, we see everybody on a spectrum, right? So we think about it in a journey. Maybe some companies are just rolling out levels and they're thinking about values-based competencies to start. Maybe other organizations are further along and their employees are really biting at wanting clarity for their role. So I think one of the things that luckily we've been able to be really flexible with our customers is how you think about initiating your foundational structure in terms of your career frameworks. It can look like many different things. So as we dive in, we'll talk more about that. But we'll start with the profile page of an employee. This is Kate here. You can see in Pando, there are a couple things that we're really focused on. One, we want to optimize the experience for employees. As we all know, most people-related tools or HR-related tools were not built to be company-wide tools. And so the usability, the level of information and transparency that employees have isn't as great as we'd like it to. It works great for the people team and it gives us great metrics for executives. But what we really wanted to focus on was how do we optimize the experience for employees so that they know what to action. And so when an employee gets to their profile page, it doesn't matter if they're an IC or if they're a manager, they have visibility into seeing where they are in the business. So what level are you at? Not necessarily what your title is, but what level are you at within the business? And then they can see their progress within that level. So we want to remove this idea that employees understand how they're doing during a performance cycle only. We want to provide transparency so that they have clarity into where are they today, their manager has that clarity and transparency, and the business has that clarity and transparency. And so this progress bar is filled in with the ratings underneath of each of these competencies that you're seeing. And so you can see in this example company, they decided on 3 categories of competencies. We've got our values-based competencies, we've got how we work together, and then we have functionally focused competencies. And so for Kate here, the goal is that she has clarity to understand where she's excelling. For example, customer focus. This rating bar underneath is from building is the first line, the midline is delivering at her level, and then the furthest line out means that Kate is consistently exceeding expectations. And so Kate has an anchor to understand, where should I focus my time and energy when I'm thinking about my performance, when I'm thinking about my development? Collaboration, storytelling, and trust. She's not quite yet at delivering at her level. So those might be 3 areas that Kate can own and initiate her performance and development behaviors around. The system also facilitates several other behaviors that help to drive this alignment between manager and their team, as well as the continuous motion. Before we get into that, though, I'm just going to open up the rubric here, the career framework, because this is, as I mentioned before, the foundational element that really helps to drive this sustained performance. And so when we first start working with our clients, this is the first thing that we do. We have a mini consulting engagement that's built into our programming around implementation, where we help our customers either define, sometimes elevate, or sometimes it's simply just getting in their levels into the system, so that when an employee comes in, if they're a level 7 employee as an IC, they can clearly see what are expectations. What does it mean for me to be a level 7 in this company? Because it's most likely going to look much different from their previous organization or previous organizations. So they have clarity on that. You can also see what the opportunities are within the business. So where does the management leveling start? What does that track look like, if that's something that I'm open to exploring? But we also see with a lot of our customers that they're wanting to implement more levels that allow individuals to become senior level contributors, individual contributors within the business. So when we look at your leveling framework, we consider a lot of things: what's happening today, where's the business going, and we help support you with coming up with a customized leveling framework. The second piece of this career framework are the competencies. So this is where employees really understand in more detail what are example behaviors and things that I can be doing in order to develop or grow. What does it mean for me to be collaborating effectively as an individual contributor who's at a level 1? And so again, in this example company, we've got a functional category, how we work, values-based. Employees have transparency into other departments. So this also provides a mechanism for them to understand what the mobility is within your organization. But they also have that clarity to see, okay, if I'm an IC1 today and I'm excited about becoming an IC2, how do I grow into that? And what does the comparison look like between me delivering at a level 1 versus a level 2? And so with Pando, we have a competency library of a couple hundred competencies that have been pre-built. So one of the beautiful things that a lot of our customers enjoy is that they do not have to write competencies from scratch. Has anybody written a competency from scratch here? I'm just curious if you want to drop it in the chat here, or worked with their managers to try and facilitate writing competencies. It's usually a heavy lift. It's usually a big project. And so one of the nice things is, instead of writing from scratch, you can use our library. The library defines the competencies at every level that you all have decided on, and then your managers can simply edit. So they don't have to develop this content from scratch. So when we do get back to the implementation of the competencies, this is where supporting employees in understanding how to leverage these competencies is really valuable, because we've seen over and over again, some of you all might have experienced this. We build out this competency framework. It's in a spreadsheet. We spent a lot of time working on this spreadsheet to provide resources for employees, and then it sits and nobody actually knows how to action it. So the goal with Pando is making sure that we can continuously action these career frameworks. So when we think about things like employees requesting feedback, when an employee requests feedback, in Pando 360 feedback is always on. So if Kate wanted to reach out to a colleague and say, hey, I've been working on my collaboration skills. We've got a project coming up, would love your feedback on how I'm doing when it comes to this competency. And she can send that through to her colleague. Kate could always also provide her colleague Jamal feedback. And what's going to happen is the context of competencies is going to pop up so that we make sure that it's actually relevant to Jamal here. So Kate could select that she wanted to provide feedback to Jamal when it comes to communication, and then removing the bias of Kate's understanding or thoughts of her understanding of how Jamal should be delivering when it comes to communicating effectively at his level and his role. We have the definition up here for Kate. So she has the support to understand what it means for Jamal. And then when she does provide feedback, she can provide constructive feedback. She can provide kudos or positive feedback, kind of a mix of both. But there's also a template so that when she does send this through, this template's in the SBI model. So situation, the behavior that she observed, and then the impact. So when Jamal gets this feedback, it's provided in a way where he understands what went well or what didn't go so well and can make those adjustments. So as you can see here, we've embedded the career frameworks into a behavior that we see commonly that a lot of people struggle with. This ensures that people have that clarity and that understanding of how to provide that feedback and gives some comfort in making sure that they're providing relevant feedback here. So I'll pause. Do we have any questions yet that are coming up? Is anybody working on continuous feedback or building up continuous feedback in the organization?
I have a question related to that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, please.
Um, I'm trying to, introduce like a culture of continuous feedback, and the demographic is a lot of engineers and scientists and very sort of quantitative focused people. And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts or suggestions, or anyone else, on making continuous feedback more structured and objective. Like, you need to provide feedback this often, or this number of pieces of feedback. And what I have some thoughts, but like some pros and cons to making it that structured.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. We usually find that technical teams love the structure of the way that this is mapped out, because they typically already have different ceremonies around things like a sprint that they just went through. And then they'll have a retro to review that sprint. And during that time, that's when a lot of our customers will initiate requesting or providing feedback during that behavior that's already happening. Because as a lot of you know, from a psychology perspective, it's much easier for us to attach new behaviors to existing behaviors. So it typically works really well with technical teams to add on an opportunity for them to, for example, let's say they have their goals logged in Pando here, and they close out the goal at the end of the sprint, or maybe it's an achievement that they accomplished during that sprint or that project. the system will then prompt them to say, is there anyone that you worked on this with that you want to request or provide feedback on? So aligning those with initiatives or programs that they already have in place has been really, really powerful for our customers. And we see the technical teams are the ones that are oftentimes driving a tool like this into the business and a program like this into the business. But I'm curious, has anybody else experienced something different or built up something different that's worked? And Sophie, that was a question from you, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. What are your thoughts around on just the suggestion from our customers?
Sorry, thoughts or suggestion for?
Thoughts around the suggestion that our customers have initiated, the program that I just talked about.
Yeah, I'm very pro making it more clear and structured in the beginning and building that habit. And I like what you mentioned around like habit stacking and putting it already like attaching it to a goal, and that's very visual for everyone. Um I think that in the beginning, for teams who are not used to giving continuous feedback, it feels like way more work, and way more mental load. But what I try typically to say is that if you give feedback more consistently, like in the long run, you're actually saving yourself a lot of effort and time, from having to do the really in-depth reviews that are usually like too little, too late. Um, so I try to like flip the effort mindset there.
Yeah, 100%. And I think there's things in Pando that can help with that. So there's also notifications that employees can receive via Slack or email, the different places that employees are already sitting today in order to initiate that, especially when it comes to giving peer feedback. But I think that, to your point, talking about the most impactful feedback and the way that we think about training employees on this is you want to provide or receive a piece of feedback at least every month. Because by the time you get feedback at the end of the year, it's not the actual feedback that you would have received when the thing originally happened. It's some semblance of what this person remembers happened, which may not be accurate. And then you've gone a year with not being able to work on something that you could have been improving the entire time. So when we think about sustained performance and optimizing for performance, that's a huge piece to what Pando supports. The other thing too is when we think about one-on-ones, we see a lot of activity. This is our one-on-one feature. It's called meetings. And this is a template that allows the employee to fill in, the topics that they want to talk about, priorities, goals. We see a lot of activity around feedback here. So between manager and employee, because as we all know, there's a lot of feedback that's shared during a one-on-one that never gets documented. And so this is a really easy way for you to include this as a piece of just what's happening during a one-on-one conversation. And then there's also the access to the rubric here. So if we're talking about an area where I'm providing you feedback, we have the reference of that career framework in order to anchor that feedback to as well during this conversation. So we see a lot of feedback being exchanged here too. Again, habit stacking. So adding this to a one-on-one conversation that's already taking place. Okay, so as we think about aggregating all of these different pieces of information, the goal is that the employee and the manager have a much more lightweight assessment. To your point, Sophie, we want to make sure that once we get to the assessment period, we have this aggregate of information. So the assessment itself is going to be less cumbersome because we already have things like achievements that have been logged. We already have things like goals that have been added to the system. And employees can really easily select which goals they want to include in their assessment. So step one is to align or connect your areas of impact. Step two of your self-assessment is going to be to assess yourself on your competencies. So how would you rate yourself against each of these competencies from building through to outperforming? And you have the context here. So you have your definitions of your competencies, you have all the feedback that you've received, any previous assessments. And so this is a really easy way for employees to go through, rate themselves on the competencies. In this example, there would be 3 different competency categories. And then there's a reflection within Pando where they can map out a start, stop, continue, or customize these questions based off of questions that you all might have. Managers go through a similar experience. So they're able to rate each of their reports on the competencies, but they have, again, all of that context that's already in the system and available. And then they have a draft view where they can prep for their performance conversation or for their development conversation with each individual on their team. So they can add in notes, they can adjust ratings if they need to, if they have some awarenesses. And so following the assessment between the employee and their manager, the full assessment is submitted and it creates what we call a calibration. And so as the name suggests, the goal of this is to make sure that there's alignment between the manager and their employee on what they need to be focused on and what they could be developing within. And so you can see at the top, it starts with goals, alignment of the competency ratings and their overall progress, which is owned by their manager's ratings. They can see the highlights, again, so those areas that of impact that they added in the performance assessment. And then they have the calibration view, which shows their manager's ratings with the black line. The orange line is the employees' ratings. And so we can see there's some inconsistency here and misalignment. The next area is where the majority of time is spent in these conversations, because this is the opportunity for manager and employee to really dig into the areas that are of highest impact. And so if we agree on a rating, this isn't an area that we need to spend a ton of time on. Where we disagreed, for instance, insights, the manager rated their employee higher here than the employee rated themselves. This is an opportunity to talk about what the employee isn't seeing, where they're doing better than they think they're doing, and what they should continue doing. Marketing strategy and storytelling, you can see the employee rated themselves higher than their manager rated them. So this is that opportunity to spend some time and talk through, from a marketing strategy perspective, what's the gap here? And where could the employee be improving in order to get to outperforming, and in the storytelling example here, to delivering. And so this is where the calibration really takes place between manager and employee, because it's an alignment conversation. So the employee leaves this conversation with very detailed insights into the specifics of what they can be focused on instead of generalizations. The manager also has this, it's documented, and this is what they would use in their continued conversations throughout the year. So one-on-ones, etc. Because this is lighter weight, this takes about 50% less time for managers to complete. This is something that a lot of our customers are starting to implement more regularly, because it's not as cumbersome as the traditional review. So I'll pause here and let me see if anybody had any questions. Any questions coming up?
I have a question, but I don't want to be speaking so much more. But is there a way to capture notes as you're going through this conversation with an employee? Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a notes section. It's just I don't have it in this view here. But you're able to add notes into each of the sections underneath of the competencies. So you're able to define or add additional notes in here. And then you're also able to create goals. So the employee can create their goals in collaboration with the manager at the same time. Any other thoughts or questions coming up so far? Does this seem is this resonating with anybody on the call here? Is this really not resonating with the way that you all think about performance and development? I'm curious what's coming up for you all. I know, Sophie, pieces of this are resonating for some of your customers. Sarah, I'm curious from your standpoint. Oh, there you are. Oh, this is Sarah Ward. Okay. It's resonating. I'd imagine it could also feel a bit overwhelming at first to new managers and employees. Yeah, Sarah, which pieces do you think would feel overwhelming?
I think it can just feel like a lot to take in, a lot to read, a lot to feel like you should know up front. I think what I'm seeing in newer managers is they don't know what they should be evaluating on or what that necessarily looks like, even when their, employee is maybe exhibiting those behaviors or not exhibiting those behaviors. Is it enough? Is it not enough? So just all very natural things as you go to build this from the ground up or implement it for the first time. It's just a lot of sort of change management in the beginning to get this to be that ideal state. It's beautiful. It's, thorough. It's just, it doesn't happen right out of the gate.
Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely learnings that take place. And I think one of the things that we've figured out is when we do our trainings, for instance, the training isn't on the platform solely and how you use the platform. The communication and the support around the communication needs to go out to the team so that they understand the program and what it's meant to do. And there might be some additional support or training that you do with your managers around leveling and how to talk about leveling. But to your point, for newer managers, what we typically see is it does provide them with a bit of cushion because they're a lot of them are flying blind, so they aren't quite sure what to think about or what to anchor to. And this also gives them a little bit more support, especially when they're having like coaching conversations with HR or conversations with their manager on how do I work with this employee on X or how should I think about this? It gives them more of a foundation and some footing in order to come to that feeling like they have an idea instead of it being, a blank slate or more general. But I do hear what you're saying. There's definitely training that is involved in this and appropriate communication that needs to go out to support the team for sure. Yeah, and that's a good point, Barb. A lot of companies will start with less competencies. So in this example company that we've been looking at, they've got the 3 different categories. A lot of our customers start with values-based competencies. So they'll start small and then they'll build on what's available in the system for employees. Employees typically really want these role-specific or functional competencies. So this comes soon after, usually within the first year. But a lot of our customers will initially roll out with values-based competencies, get everybody comfortable with a few, and then, we'll build on the rest of the competencies throughout the year, which is really helpful. Great. Well, I'm happy to stay on if anybody has any additional questions. Thanks everyone who asked questions and engaged. If you have questions after, please feel free to reach out to me directly. It's Misha at pando.com. So I'll drop my email in the chat for anyone. If you want to set up time or go through the system together one-on-one, I'm happy to do that. But otherwise, we'll stop things here. And for anybody who's listening to this, who's interested in digging back into the content, maybe you weren't able to join some of the earlier sessions, we're going to be sending out a recording of all of the sessions. So you'll have a playback of everything. So you'll have access to all of that after the event here. All right, everyone. Thanks so much. Have a good night.